Hi there and welcome back to the channel. Today's video is about crime in Portugal, which according to PSP statistics in Lisbon is actually on the decrease and society is much safer than people think. Alright, so the PSP in Lisbon held a press conference and they announced that, statistically crime was better in 2024, at least the first 10 months of 2024, than it had been in 2023 during those same 10 months. Admittedly, the year is not over and of course things could change, but as things stand at the moment, from January to October, if you compare the 2 years, the police spokesman announced that levels of general crime in the Lisbon metropolitan area had fallen by 9.4% compared to the same period in 2023, while the statistics for violent crime were pretty much stagnant. They showed a 0.2% reduction. And his remarks that followed were quite startling because he indicated that, in his opinion at least, this showed that there was somewhat of a disconnect between people's perceptions of how dangerous and how full of crime society had become and the reality on the ground, which actually showed that there was no real change and actually a slight improvement. So the suggestion is very much there that people, through maybe overexposure to the wrong kinds of social media or something, are generating this false impression, using their imaginations and thinking that crime is on the up and up, whereas in reality everything is just rainbows and unicorns and things are just going absolutely fine. One thing that I would bring up is that I think that this may be an isolated case in Lisbon, that, perhaps just that one area has basically experienced a stagnation or slight reduction in crime, or it may be due to something statistical. You have to be careful with statistics because they can be massaged. Crimes can be categorized in different ways, or perhaps the methods of data collection have been changed, or simply crimes haven't been registered and recorded in the same way that they used to be. I think that that can definitely account for something, and it needs to be looked at whether that has occurred in this case, because obviously the PSP, as the police, they are never going to want to stand there and say crime is up, because it just makes them look bad, it makes them look incompetent. So whenever an agency like the police announces crime statistics, you always have to take it with a grain of salt, because obviously they're trying to sell you their marketing message that they're doing their job in a good way, and that may or may not be the case. It needs to be carefully analysed. I would just point out that basically the data for 2023 did not show that crime was decreasing in Portugal at all, and that crime has actually been on the rise for the greater part of the last decade in Portugal. It's been a steady upward trend. Statistics by the Directorate General for Justice Policy showed that in 2023 compared to 2022 there was an 8% increase in the level of general crime in Portuguese society in the raw numbers that were experienced, and all categories of crime were up, particularly crimes against the person and other kinds of violent crime. And in fact, the only category of crime which did not increase in 2023 were crimes against pets, which admittedly is an area of concern, but it's perhaps not as important as things like murders and robberies and assaults and stuff like that. So I have three key questions about this. Number one, is this some form of gaslighting by the police in Lisbon to try to make people feel more secure, try to calm things down, put the emphasis on social media disinformation and things like that? Is that the case? Are they trying to play that kind of role in society? Perhaps. I think it needs to be looked at. Secondly, to what extent are the statistics being massaged or altered? Have there been any changes in the way that the data is collected or collated? Are crimes categorized in different ways? Have there been problems with the ways that crimes have been reported to the police by the public, or the way that the police have actually recorded those crimes? I think that all of that needs to be looked at, plus the fact that this could just be a statistical blip in Lisbon, and next year the statistic could be much higher, and it would be, in line with current trends nationwide. I think it would be very unwise to trust the police to give honest statistics about their work. I think that should be done by an independent body. And I'm much more inclined to believe the statistics supplied from the Director General of Justice Policy, because it's an independent body separate from the police. I don't think that statistics supplied by a body about the work of that body are generally the most reliable source of information. Obviously, the police have an interest in making themselves look good and competent, and if crime goes up, they don't look good or competent. People will criticise them. So, I prefer to see the statistics coming from a third party, and there's definitely cause to analyse these statistics in greater depth if that's possible, to find out where the truth ultimately lies. And lastly, we're basically being asked not to believe our eyes and ears. And when we read about stabbings and shootings and rioting in different districts of Lisbon and things like that, escaped criminals and all of that kind of thing that's been going on this year, assassinations in broad daylight in Porto, brought on by drug gangs and stuff. Are we really seriously saying that all that stuff existed in Portugal in the past? The riots that we saw after the death of Odair Muniz and stuff, that happened in Portugal before. Did it? I don't think it did. Are we imagining this stuff? Really? I mean, is this stuff just replacing some other crime which previously took place, and the criminals are now participating in these crimes rather than other crimes, so the overall statistics don't change? I really don't know, but what I can tell you is how I feel. And I feel, living in rural Portugal, reasonably safe. But when I visit a Portuguese city, I definitely don't. And I see a lot of property crime in Portuguese cities, As someone who likes to walk early in the morning, I saw when I lived in Coimbra an awful lot of cars with broken windows and people had stolen stuff out of them. I saw quite a lot of handbags and wallets, just thrown on the side of the road, basically because they had been stolen and the contents had been taken out of them, and then the handbags or whatever were just dumped there. I think that indicates that levels of crime in Portugal are not insignificant, and definitely I think that levels of violent crime are on the up and up here, and the statistics supplied by the independent Director General of Justice Policy affirm that. So I continue to believe that, whatever the police in Lisbon have to say. My conclusion is simply that Portugal is becoming more dangerous than it used to be. It used to have a reputation as being one of the most orderly and safest places in the world. I think that reputation has started to slip a little bit, and at least in the eyes of people overseas, Portugal is no longer seen in quite the same light as it was. Now you can argue that that's just because of social media misinformation, but to be honest, I really don't think it is. Take a look around you, and you can choose to believe the statistics supplied by the PSP in Lisbon, or you can choose to believe your own experience and what people around you really have to say. Alright, well that brings us to the conclusion of this video. I hope people enjoyed the content, and I will see you soon in the next one.